On a dark and stormy night, a car navigated its way along a desolate country road, shrouded in a thick blanket of fog. The headlights pierced through the mist, casting eerie shadows on the twisted branches of the trees lining the road. Inside the car, the atmosphere was tense. The driver's knuckles were white as they gripped the steering wheel, and the passengers sat in silence, their gaze fixed on the swirling darkness outside. Without warning, the car began to skid, and the driver's panicked attempts to regain control proved futile. The vehicle careened off the road and collided with a gnarled oak tree with a sickening crunch. In the aftermath, a heavy silence descended upon the scene. The occupants of the car lay still, dazed by the impact. Slowly, they began to regain their senses, their hearts pounding in their chests as they surveyed the wreckage around them. Amidst the wreckage, they spotted a figure lying motionless on the ground. With a sense of urgency, they scrambled out of the car and rushed to the side of the injured person. But as they drew closer, a wave of dread washed over them. The figure was eerily still, and the pallor of death clung to their features. "We need to help them," the passenger exclaimed, their voice trembling with urgency. The driver, their hands shaking, nodded in agreement as they knelt beside the injured person. But as they attempted to render aid, a sudden chill filled the air, and the fog seemed to thicken around them, obscuring their surroundings in a veil of darkness. Panic seized their hearts as they realized they were enveloped in an impenetrable shroud of mist. In the eerie silence that followed, a haunting wail pierced the darkness, sending shivers down their spines. And then, as suddenly as it had descended, the fog began to dissipate, leaving them standing in a clearing surrounded by the wreckage of the crash. Shaken but determined, they searched frantically for any sign of the missing driver, but their efforts were in vain. It was as though they had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a lingering sense of unease. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the memory of that fateful night haunted them like a specter, refusing to be forgotten. They became consumed by a relentless desire to uncover the truth, to unravel the mystery that had eluded them for so long. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, they delved into the history of the road, scouring archives and questioning locals in search of clues. But the more they uncovered, the deeper the mystery seemed to become, as whispers of ancient curses and vengeful spirits echoed through the corridors of time. Undeterred, they pressed on, their determination unyielding in the face of adversity. And as they delved deeper into the shadows that shrouded the road, they unearthed secrets that had long been buried, secrets that threatened to consume them in their entirety. But they refused to be swayed by fear, for they knew that the truth lay waiting to be discovered, hidden amidst the fog and darkness that cloaked the road in mystery. And so, with unwavering resolve, they embarked on a journey into the unknown, determined to uncover the secrets that lay buried beneath the surface of the night. On a dark night when the rain was pouring down, the drops hitting the windows were dancing rhythmically as an old bus drove silently. The interior of the bus was filled with the monotonous rhythm of the engine vibrating with clicking sounds. The passengers' faces were looking at the play of light accompanying the movement of raindrops on the windows, trying to vaguely make out the scenery behind the fog outside. Each passenger seemed lost in their own thoughts, lost in their own world in silence. Suddenly, the bus came to a sudden stop, and the passengers jumped, startled, as if awakened by a jolt. The driver's worried voice indicated that the vehicle was skidding rapidly and losing control. The bus began to slide rapidly downhill and eventually crashed into a tree and stopped. The terrified screams of the passengers spread around, drowning out the sound of the rain. As the fog made everything outside even more obscure, the passengers quickly got out of the bus and ran towards the scene. When the fog curtain parted, an old and abandoned beach house appeared in front of them. The windows of the house were full of broken glass. The door was rusted and crackled with the howling wind. However, the voice asking for help was coming from this house. The passengers hesitantly took their steps and headed towards the door. The door opened silently and creaked quietly under the old wooden floorboards as they stepped inside. A dark and quiet house welcomed them. As I walked around the house, there was a mysterious atmosphere at every step. There were dusty covers, old books, and worn items on the furniture. The cracks in the walls bore the marks of time, and the wallpaper was worn. Every corner inside the house contained a story buried deep in the past. Then, they noticed something in a room that caught their attention. An old painting hung on the wall was strikingly different from the others. The painting featured a portrait depicting the former owners of the beach house. However, the people in the portrait did not look like an ordinary family. They looked as if they were afraid of something. Passengers approached the painting with curiosity and began to examine the details. But suddenly, the painting's eyes noticed that it was moving strangely. The eyes appeared to be watching the passengers, as if they were trying to convey a message. After this strange incident, the travelers became discouraged and did not want to continue investigating the mysteries inside the house. However, they had already turned back to reach a travel point, because there was still a thick fog outside and returning back would be too risky. Holding each other tightly, the passengers continued to move forward in silence. With every step, they became aware of the mysteries and dangers inside the house. But no matter what, they had to muster up their courage to uncover the truth and continue to unravel the secrets of this dark house. Finally, they reached the top floor of the house and began investigating the rooms. But with every step, they encountered mysterious voices and shadows. They had a feeling that something was moving around the house, but they didn't know exactly what it was. Finally, they found a room on the top floor. The door opened silently, and when they entered, they found an old book on a table. The pages of the book were covered with old and faded writing, as if they were telling a story that had once happened. The passengers examined the book carefully and began to read the story. But they noticed that with each page, the story got darker and scarier. They learned about the terrible events experienced by the former owners of the house and the mysteries inside the house. And during that night, the travelers staying at the beach house were forced to confront the terrible secrets inside the house. Because this beach house bore the dark traces of the past and forced them to have an experience they will never forget. The market was crowded with shoppers. Sophie was pushing her shopping cart towards the grocery section of the market. However, she felt a strange atmosphere. A coldness that froze his soul suddenly shook him, and he looked around uneasily. But there was nothing around that looked ordinary. Then he noticed a figure in a dark corner at the end of the grocery stall. At first, she thought maybe it was an illusion. But when the figure started leaning towards her and looking at her, she realized it was real. The figure was a man whose face was blurred and filled with an eerie smile. Sophie's heart began to pound, and she froze for a moment. But then he started to quicken his pace and run away towards other parts of the grocery store. But around every corner, she noticed the dark figure reappearing. She knew this man was after her, and she had to get rid of him. As she sped through the aisles, the screams and fuss of other shoppers began to grow louder. Everyone noticed that there was a strange atmosphere inside the market, and they started to run away, hitting each other in panic. But Sophie could feel the dark figure approaching her, her breath on her neck. Eventually, Sophie managed to escape to the storage area at the back of the store. But in the warehouse was a collection of the grocer's dark secrets. There were rotten fruits and spoiled vegetables on the shelf, emitting a creepy smell. Old and worn photographs hung on the walls, bearing traces of ghosts from the past. Sophie hoped to escape the shadowy figure by hiding in the warehouse. However, the figure was silently approaching to find him. The footsteps were heard in his ears. Sophie felt cornered, with nowhere to escape. And that night, in the dark aisles of the grocery store and the rotten corners of the grocery store, Sophie and the others were forced to confront terrible secrets. Because this market had not only shopping but also a scary grocery store bearing the traces of the dark past. Sophie was writhing in despair when she came face to face with the dark figure in the warehouse. His bonds were held tightly, and he was surrounded by dark silence. The dark figure was silently walking around him, looking at him with his eerie smile. Sophie's back was against the wall. She was retreating helplessly. As the dark figure approached, his breath could be felt on the back of his neck. As his eyes flashed in the grip of panic, a scream rang out and everything stopped instantly. In the warehouse, the moment the dark figure mysteriously disappeared, Sophie's heart continued to beat rapidly. Silence reigned for a while. but she still felt that the danger was not over. She looked around uneasily, but she couldn't find any trace of the figure. Just as he felt a little relieved, a creak was heard and a dark shadow appeared in the warehouse. Sophie turned her eyes in this direction and looked at the box carefully. The dark figure approached the box and took out something. Sophie's heart was beating rapidly and she was breathing, but she was trying desperately to find a way out. The dark figure approached Sophie, flashing a knife he had pulled from the box. Everything stopped at that moment and Sophie saw the madness in the dark figure's eyes. Just then, a noise was heard as the door was quickly opened. The police burst into the store and quickly approached to save Sophie. The dark figure looked at Sophie in momentary confusion and then tried to run away, but was caught and arrested by the cops. Sophie was rescued and survived her terrifying experience at the grocery store. However, what he experienced that day left deep scars on his soul. Now that she was the leading actor in a dark story that he would never forget again. If you don't watch this video, you will be making a big mistake.